Hi. My name is Addison Rowan. And 3 weeks ago, my brother tried to delay my cancer surgery. So I wouldn't ruin his promotion dinner. He called it, just a minor procedure. I call it the day I stopped being quiet. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee, the kind that lingered at the back of the throat. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, buzzing in a rhythm that felt almost human, steady, indifferent, endless. The doctor's lips moved, but his words landed in fragments. Malignant 8 hours extensive surgery. I nodded as if I understood, but my pulse had its own language, and all it said was no. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee, the kind that lingered at the back of the throat. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, buzzing in a rhythm that felt almost human, steady, indifferent, endless. The doctor's lips moved, but his words landed in fragments. Malignant 8 hours extensive surgery. I nodded as if I understood, but my pulse had its own language, and all it said was no. A paper cup trembled between my palms. Water sloshed against the rim, and a drop slid down my wrist. The doctor's voice faded into background static. I stared at his tie instead, small blue dots, too cheerful for what he was saying. "Are you hearing me, Ms. Rowan?" he asked gently. I wanted to tell him I heard everything, every syllable breaking against the edges of my composure. But my voice stayed inside. This isn't happening. Not to me. Not when there's still laundry waiting at home, bills on the counter, people who assume I'm fine. When I stepped outside, the Seattle air was heavy with drizzle. The sky was pale gray, almost polite in its sadness. I dialed my mother first. "Mom," I whispered. "It's cancer. They said it's serious." There was a pause, short enough to hope, long enough to hurt. Then her voice came through, soft but careless. "Oh, honey, maybe it's just stress. You worry too much. Drink some ginger tea, it helps inflammation." I almost laughed. Ginger tea. My mother's cure for grief, anger, heartbreak, and now tumors. Mom. Don't panic, Addison. Your brother's promotion dinner is in 2 weeks. Focus on something positive. Her voice blurred with the sound of the TV in the background. I could hear applause from a sitcom. When the line went dead, I called Damon. Voicemail. My father next. Busy. The drizzle had turned into steady rain, soaking through my coat, but I stayed there anyway, staring at the reflection of the hospital lights in the puddles. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood very still, listening to the city breathe without me. 2 weeks later, I lay on a gurney beneath sterile white lights, the smell of antiseptic and latex stinging my nose. The consent forms were on the tray beside me, already signed in small, neat handwriting that didn't look like mine. No one had come. Nurse Juno Calder adjusted the 4-line with quiet efficiency. She glanced at the empty chair beside my bed. "Anyone coming to stay with you?" she asked. I smiled, though it felt like a lie. "They're busy. There's a family event this weekend." Her brow furrowed. She didn't ask more. Instead, she touched my hand gently, the warmth startling against my cold fingers. "You're not alone," she said softly. It wasn't true, but it helped anyway. As the anesthesia crept through my veins, I thought about birthday candles. Damon blowing them out while my parents clapped. I had been in the corner, holding the camera, my face half hidden by the lens. I've always been the quiet celebration. The world narrowed to beeping monitors and muted voices. The ceiling swayed slightly, and then everything fell away. When I woke, the light was cruel. White, buzzing, endless. My body felt split open, stitched together, foreign. Tubes snaked from my side. I turned my head toward the window, expecting flowers, a card, something. Nothing. A nurse changed my bag without speaking. I fumbled for my phone, pressing the power button with trembling hands. The screen stayed dark, no messages, no missed calls. My throat tightened. Maybe I didn't wake up. Maybe this is the waiting room between living and being forgotten. Hours blurred. Footsteps echoed in the hall. The scent of hospital food drifted in, metallic and stale. My body ached in rhythms that matched the machines beside me. When the evening shift arrived, Juno reappeared, her face tired but kind. She fluffed my pillow, adjusted the curtain. For a moment, the air felt softer. "You made it through," she said quietly. "Through what?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Through everything they thought you couldn't." Her words settled inside me, small and steady, like a pulse. Later that night, I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the pain. The walls were thin. I could hear the faint hum of a song, music, laughter, the clinking of glasses. My heart stumbled in recognition. "What's that noise?" I murmured. Juno hesitated. "The hospital's event center is right above us. There's a celebration tonight." Her voice trailed off, but I didn't need her to say it. I already knew. Damon's promotion dinner. I lay there, the edges of consciousness flickering like a broken film reel. The music above swelled, cheers, applause, champagne corks popping. My fingers tightened around the blanket. I thought about the way my mother had said don't overreact. About Damon's voicemail that never came. About my father's line that stayed busy. Maybe this is what dying quietly looks like. The laughter grew louder. Juno closed the curtain and turned off the overhead light, leaving only the soft glow from the monitor. My breath steadied. The pain sharpened, then dulled. I stared at the ceiling where faint shadows danced from the lights above. I wasn't in recovery, I whispered to no one. I was erased. The words hung in the air, gentle and final, like the ending of a prayer. At first, I thought it might be a party for another patient, someone who'd survived something triumphant. But the beat never stumbled. It was too steady. Too perfect. Joy. But not mine. The rain whispered against the window. A kind of mercy, soft and constant, like a hand on the back reminding me I was still here. I closed my eyes. But the bass vibrated through the walls. No one told me the event center was directly above the surgical floor. No one warned me I'd recover beneath the applause. I didn't need a program to know whose name they were celebrating. Juno came in quietly, pushing a small tray with meds and a cup of applesauce. She paused by the curtain, her eyes darting upward toward the ceiling. "That's the hospital's ballroom," she said gently. "There's a dinner tonight for the executive team." My mouth was dry, the kind of dry no water could solve. I looked at her, already knowing. "Is it Damon's?" She nodded once. No explanation. No need. He didn't text. Didn't call. But he showed up for the cameras. The phone buzzed. A message from Mom. I didn't move at first. I stared at the name like it was someone else. When I finally opened it, my hands were colder than the Ford drip. "David wants everyone in the family portrait. Can you come up for 10 minutes? Wear something light, nothing dramatic." 10 minutes. I couldn't sit up without pressing the button for help. I hadn't brushed my hair. There were stitches across my abdomen. But sure, let's prioritize the family portrait. That was the problem, wasn't it? I wasn't family when I was hurting. I was family when the camera came out. My mind pulled an old memory out of nowhere. A birthday party, Damon's 10th, maybe. I'd been holding the camcorder. I remember Mom turning to me and saying, "Get the angle right. We want this one to look perfect." I wasn't in a single frame. Not even one. "You were always so quiet, Addison," she used to say. Damon loved the spotlight. As if that made it fair. Juno was still there, waiting. She noticed the tremble in my hands, the way the phone sat in my lap like it weighed more than the 4 stand. "You want me to say something?" she asked. I met her eyes, steady now. "No. I want you to forget this happened." But her lips pressed into a line. She nodded, then turned and walked toward the elevator. I should have stopped her. I didn't. Facebook was still open on my phone. Habit, I guess. I'd scrolled that app more in hospital rooms than anywhere else. Distraction. Noise. A way to pretend I was part of things I never got invited to. And there it was. Damon's page. Public. Because of course it was. The live stream had started 10 minutes ago. He stood at the front of the ballroom, a champagne glass in one hand, the other tucked into the pocket of his tuxedo. The lighting was golden, soft. Elegant. Applause rippled as he raised his glass. "Thank you all," he began, "for believing in me. For standing by me, even when I worked long hours, missed birthdays, sacrificed weekends. I did it for this. For us. For the hospital." The audience clapped louder. A woman off camera asked, "Is your sister here tonight?" He laughed. A real laugh, full and confident. "She's recovering from a tiny outpatient thing," he said with a wave of his hand. "She likes to make a splash." I dropped the phone. It landed face down on the blanket. Tiny outpatient thing. He didn't minimize me. He erased me. I lay back against the pillow. The ceiling above me was the same ceiling beneath his feet. We were in the same building. But he was center stage. I was post-op with a drain still in place. My thumb found the volume button. I needed to hear it again, like picking at a scab. She likes to make a splash. I turned off the phone. I had been split open, anesthetized, cut, stitched, monitored. I had signed papers acknowledging risk of death. I had woken up alone. And my brother called it a splash. I looked down at my stomach. There were bandages, lines of tape, bruising in shades of purple and green. Nothing dramatic. The music upstairs swelled. Some kind of jazz. They were probably eating steak. My stomach twisted, not from hunger, but from the sickening contrast. He had planned that speech. Rehearsed it. That line. My pain was a soundbite. I turned to the side slowly. The nurse call button blinked steadily like a heartbeat. I didn't press it. The curtain rippled slightly as someone stepped in. Juno. She held her phone in one hand. The screen was lit. The video still playing. Her jaw was tight, her face unreadable. She didn't say a word. Just held it out so I could see. And behind Damon, in the far corner of the ballroom, barely in frame, there she was. A woman in surgical scrubs. Watching. Quietly. Softly. Unnoticed. The image stayed with me long after Juno left the room. That figure in scrubs, half hidden by shadows, watching from the corner of the ballroom, she was real. I replayed the live stream again, slowing it frame by frame until my thumb shook. Damon's laugh still echoed through the tinny speaker. My name rolled off his tongue like something disposable, the punchline of his perfect night. He'd made me into a story that fit his narrative. The sick sister, dramatic, craving attention. I was a prop who hadn't shown up for the scene. The screen light flickered against the walls, washing the room in shades of blue and white. The sound of machines hummed softly, marking time. Outside, the city had gone quiet except for the faint hum of rain against glass. I whispered to the room, not to anyone. He turned my life into a joke. Juno came back before dawn with new bandages and a determined look. She didn't try to smile this time. Her tone was clipped, but the anger beneath it was alive. Someone recorded the whole thing, she said. He mocked your cancer, on camera. My throat tightened. What does it matter? He's been mocking me my entire life. It matters, she said, leaning closer. It's everywhere now. The video has your name attached. I felt heat rise, not shame, not grief, something colder. If exposure is what they wanted, I said slowly, then they're about to get it. She adjusted the foreline quietly, the plastic hiss blending with the rhythm of my pulse. The light from her phone caught the edge of my chart. I noticed how she looked at me now, not like a patient, but like a witness who decided to testify. The door opened again. Dr. Leora Brandt stepped in, clipboard in hand. She was precise, graceful, exhausted in that calm way surgeons are after too many hours of pretending not to feel. She checked the monitor, then pulled a chair beside my bed. I just came from upstairs, she said. There was champagne. Speeches. Let me guess, I murmured. All about teamwork, compassion, family values. Her eyes met mine. And you, down here, forgotten. That's the brand, I said quietly. Overshadowed by default. Leora hesitated. Addison, your cancer wasn't minor. It was stage 2. We had to remove more than we expected. If you had waited even a week, her voice faltered. I begged him to read the report, I said. He skimmed it like a grocery list. Told me I was overreacting. The memory cracked open like an old wound. A week before surgery, I'd brought the scan to Damon's office. He sat behind his mahogany desk, typing between my words. Can you look at this? I asked, sliding the folder across. He barely glanced at the images. It's probably inflammation. You always overthink things. Don't make this bigger than it is, okay? You'll stress Mom out. I remembered how he smiled at me, reassuring but dismissive, the kind of smile that's really a command to shut up. Back in the present, I stared at the ceiling. He said I was fine. He said everyone gets aches. I trusted him. Leora closed the folder with a firm click. Addison, I need you to know something. The surgery schedule, it had been flagged for delay. I frowned. What do you mean, flagged? She drew a breath. There was a request to postpone your procedure until next week. I refused. Who asked for that? My voice was calm, too calm. She looked straight at me. Ask upstairs. Then she stood and left without another word. I sat in the quiet, feeling every second stretch thin. Upstairs, music. Down here, truth. Juno's phone buzzed on the tray. The screen flashed with numbers climbing, shares, views, comments. 14,000 people had seen my brother turn my illness into entertainment. I took the phone gently, scrolling through the comments. That's his sister? Jesus. How do you have a party 2 floors above your sister's ICU room? She likes to make a splash. Wow, what a monster. The words blurred. Not because of tears, but because something inside me finally stopped trembling. For the first time in years, people believed me. Not because I'd explained myself. Not because I'd fought harder to be seen. They believed me because he'd exposed himself. I handed the phone back to Juno. She looked at me like she wanted to apologize for all of it, the silence, the cruelty, the laughter echoing from the ceiling. I'm okay, I said softly. Really? This isn't shame. It's proof. She hesitated, then nodded. They'll regret this, she whispered. I don't want them to regret it, I said. I want them to live with it. The monitors hummed on, steady and indifferent. I stared at the slow green pulse on the screen. For the first time, it didn't feel like a countdown. It felt like evidence, every beat, every breath, a record that I was still here. I picked up my phone again. The same video played, but this time I watched it differently. Behind Damon, in that polished ballroom, people smiled and clapped. The hospital banner gleamed above their heads. Excellence in care, it said. Leora had been right. They toasted compassion while stepping over the truth. The rain started again, soft against the window, washing the glass clean. I scrolled to the bottom of the video and read one last comment. Sometimes silence is the loudest scream. The phone felt lighter in my hand. I turned off the screen, set it down gently, and whispered to myself, for once, they saw me. Not because I screamed. But because he did. Eels. It slipped through the blinds and landed across the hospital floor, pale and cold. I hadn't slept. My body had learned a new language, one that spoke in aches and whispers. The phone on my tray was still open to the video, frozen on my brother's smile. His laughter seemed louder in the stillness. It wasn't just neglect. It was deliberate. The soft knock at the door startled me. A young admin assistant stepped in, holding a clipboard too tightly, the way people do when they bring bad news. Ms. Rowan, she said, voice polite but brittle, the ethics board asked me to forward you this message. She cleared her throat, reading from a printed email. We received a forwarded request to delay your surgery. It was submitted by Damon Vexler, timestamped, pre-approved, and later denied by Dr. Brandt. Her words fell into the silence like a confession. I didn't blink. My pulse didn't even change. He wanted me to wait, I said softly. So I wouldn't ruin his big night. The girl hesitated, as if waiting for me to yell. But there was no energy left for that kind of noise. I thanked her. She left quickly, relieved I hadn't cried. When the door clicked shut, I stared at the ceiling. The truth settled slow and heavy, like dust after a collapse. I'd told myself they didn't understand, that their cruelty was ignorance dressed as love. But this was scheduling. Paperwork. A deliberate choice. I pressed the back of my hand against my eyes, the pain behind them sharper than the stitches beneath my ribs. The heart monitor ticked softly, keeping me company. The clock on the wall hummed. Outside, a delivery cart squeaked down the hallway. The world continued as if nothing had cracked. My mind went back a week before the surgery, dinner at my parents' house. The table covered in candlelight, Verina's signature roast chicken, the smell of rosemary, Damon at the head of the table in his pressed shirt. I don't think I can make it to the promotion dinner, I had said quietly, twisting my napkin. The scans don't look good. The doctor's talking surgery. Verina didn't even look up from her plate. Don't be selfish, Addison. Your brother's worked his whole life for this. You can't ruin that with more of your medical drama. Damon chuckled, sipping his wine. You always pick the worst time to be fragile. I remembered how the knife slipped from my hand, clattering against the plate. Dad said nothing. He reached for the salt, changed the subject. Back in the present, the smell of disinfectant replaced the memory. My voice felt foreign in my throat. He didn't just dismiss my pain, I whispered. He scheduled around it. The door opened again, and Juno walked in, her expression unreadable. She carried a small disposable phone in one hand. "The nurses' union reached out," she said. "Some of them have stories about Damon." "Let them talk," I said. "I'll listen." She placed the phone in my palm, hesitated, and then left the room. The weight of it felt strange, like holding the first decision I'd ever made entirely for myself. I dialed his number. It rang twice before his voice filled the line, too bright, too rehearsed. "Addie. You're awake. That's great. Everyone's been talking about you, what a strong comeback. You're trending, you know that? This will blow over soon." "You tried to reschedule my surgery," I said evenly. The silence stretched long enough to hear him exhale. Then came the laugh, nervous, soft. "Come on, Addie, it wasn't personal. You're fine now, right? You made it. That's what matters." "No," I said, calm as winter. "What matters is that I almost didn't. You made sure of that. Don't twist things. You've always taken everything so seriously." His tone grated, that mix of charm and condescension he'd mastered. "You have no idea how much pressure I'm under. You think this job is easy? Do you ever hear yourself?" I asked. "You nearly killed me, Damon." "Don't be dramatic," he snapped, voice hard now. "It's not like I put you on that table myself." I closed my eyes, breathing through the shaking in my chest. "If I speak," I said quietly, "you lose everything." He didn't laugh this time. Just the sound of air shifting through the line, then a click. I sat in the silence that followed, the phone still in my hand. My fingers hovered above the home screen, shaking not from fear but from clarity. For years, I'd built my peace around forgiveness, the illusion that I could keep the family intact by absorbing every wound they gave. But peace built on silence isn't peace, it's consent. The window caught a sliver of sun. It painted the four-stand gold for a moment before the light faded. I scrolled through my contacts, opened a new email draft. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. In the subject line, I typed, "Formal complaint, ethical misconduct." My hands didn't tremble now. I attached the video, the time-stamped request to delay surgery, and the forwarded messages from nurses who'd written about their own encounters with Damon's cruelty. Each document felt like a brick placed back into something I hadn't realized was collapsing, myself. When it was done, I stared at the send button. My thumb hovered above it, still. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't second-guessing. I wasn't scared. He thought I was calling to reconcile. He thought I'd play the same role, quiet, understanding, forgetful. But something in me had shifted, slow and permanent. I looked at the sterile room one more time. The gray walls, the half-empty water cup, the faint hum of machines. The quiet was almost comforting now. I whispered, not to him, not even to myself, but to the air that had carried too many of his lies. I wasn't warning him. I was giving him a chance to run. The cursor blinked once more. Then I pressed send. The cursor faded from the screen, and silence settled again. Not the kind that carried fear, but the kind that followed a decision. My room felt smaller afterward, as if the air had thickened to hold something heavier than pain. I shifted in the bed, careful of the surgical tape pulling against my skin. The tray table had melted ice chips. They tasted like nothing, but the crunch grounded me. My phone buzzed again, and I didn't reach for it. I didn't have to. It was probably the fallout. The hospital's internal newsfeed looped on the muted TV in the corner. Damon's face appeared again, smiling, polished, untouchable. The headline, "Leadership and Legacy, a Night to Remember." Then came the slideshow. One photo at a time. Bright lighting. Gold banners. White florals. Then came the family portrait. I blinked once. My mother, in navy blue. Damon's wife Maelys in champagne. My father, tucked to the side with a hand on Damon's shoulder. Damon, beaming at the center like a coronation. The photo was framed perfectly. Too perfectly. Because I wasn't in it. Not faded. Not ignored. Cropped. They'd taken a photo from 3 years ago, the last time we were all forced into the same room, and cut me out. Cleanly. As if I'd never been part of it. As if I had never held the camera, never emailed the edits, never printed the frames. I stared for a long time, waiting for the rage to come. But nothing stirred. Just a hollow kind of knowing. This time, they didn't forget me. They removed me. A soft knock followed by a mechanical squeak pulled me from the screen. A hospital volunteer, maybe 19, maybe 20, walked in, holding a plastic garment bag. "Hi. This is for you," she said with a brightness that didn't belong in this room. "There's makeup in the side pocket." I blinked. She looked unsure, maybe catching the look on my face, but kept going. "It's for the family photos. I think the note says to keep it neutral. Nothing flashy." She set the bag on the foot of the bed and left quickly. My hands moved slowly, methodically, unzipping the garment. Inside, a blush-tone dress. Soft fabric, conservative cut. Modest heels. A zipped pouch of foundation, powder, and lipstick in beige tones. Tucked in the neckline was a small card, for family photos. Keep it neutral. Nothing flashy. M. Maylis. Of course. Not a question. Not a request. A stylist's note for the extra. I didn't flinch. My hands didn't tremble. I folded the dress once, then again, and placed it gently into the trash can beside the bed. Then I opened the makeup pouch, stared at the colors that weren't mine, and dropped it in too. When the phone buzzed again, I already knew the name that would appear. Verena. The message was short. "David's disappointed you didn't show. He says this was your chance to repair your image. Don't make things worse. No, how are you feeling? No, I'm sorry. No, are you in pain? Just branding advice." I didn't respond. I set the phone face down, clicked the TV off, and lay back slowly, feeling every thread of the mattress beneath me. Juno came in 20 minutes later. She didn't speak right away. She just stood near the window, arms crossed, staring at the drip bag with a face that had stopped pretending. "They're using your silence to build his brand," she said finally. "That video, his speech, it's in the hospital's newsletter now. Titled Leading with Grace." My breath caught. "Grace is your middle name, isn't it?" she asked, eyes not leaving mine. I nodded. She exhaled. "They're branding your recovery as his strength." I looked at her. At the stand. At the trash bin still holding the folded blush dress. "Then we'll give them a better one," I said. Juno didn't ask what I meant. She just nodded and walked out. 15 minutes later, I watched her through the hallway window. She stood outside the nurse's break room, sending something from her phone. I didn't have to ask what. The video. The real one. The version they hadn't cut. With the laugh. With my name. With my body 2 floors below. I leaned back into the pillow, staring at the ceiling. It was strange how the truth didn't make you breathe easier. Just deeper. A memory came without asking. Middle school. State math competition. I'd come in first place. First in the entire state. Damon had a soccer game the same night. His team had lost, but he'd scored once. There was a trophy. He brought it into the kitchen, lifted it for everyone to see. My plaque stayed in my backpack for a week. When I finally taped it to the bulletin board near the garage, Mom said, "The lighting's better on Damon's side. Let's keep the pictures together." They didn't say, "We're proud of you." They said, "Stand next to him." I did. Back in the hospital, the phone buzzed again. A new message. But not from my family. From an unknown number. A scanned image attached. It was the original family portrait. The unedited one. My face was in it. My hand on my father's shoulder. My smile small but present. Below it, a second image. The one from the hospital slideshow. I'd been cropped clean. No jagged edges. No blurring. Just gone. The message came with a caption, "Thought you should see what they sent to PR if anonymous." A moment later, the landline in my room rang. I hadn't heard it ring once since I'd been admitted. I picked it up. "This is Miles Kavanaugh," said a voice, calm but alert. "We need to speak. I've called an emergency board meeting." I didn't ask why. I just closed my eyes and whispered, "They cropped me out of the picture. Now they'll see the whole frame." The call ended, but the sound of Miles Kavanaugh's voice stayed in the room. It was calm, measured, yet carried the kind of weight that made silence feel heavier after it left. I stared at the receiver for a few seconds before hanging up. The steady hum of the floor beside me seemed louder now. I knew something had shifted. The story wasn't confined to my hospital room anymore. By the next morning, the world outside my window was wrapped in haze. The city looked blurred, suspended in that strange quiet before storms. Juno helped me dress, layering a cardigan over my hospital gown. Every movement was deliberate, slow, steady. "You don't have to go," she said gently. "I do," I replied. "This time, I'm not the one being talked about behind closed doors." When I stepped into the hallway, the air felt colder, as if the building itself knew what was coming. The boardroom was glass and steel, modern, pristine, and painfully bright. 11 people sat around a long table, the screen at the far end paused on a frozen frame, Damon mid-speech, glass raised, smile flawless. The kind of smile that only cracked once truth caught up. Miles stood at the head of the table, hands clasped. "We're not here for damage control," he said. "We're here for accountability." Every eye followed him, but none of them moved when the door opened. Juno guided me inside, her hand steadying the four-pole that rolled beside me. The room stiffened. My mother gasped, soft but audible. Damon didn't turn. His shoulders squared as though straightening his back might rebuild the illusion. I took one careful step, then another. "I wasn't invited," I said quietly. "I came anyway. Not for you. For me." Miles gestured to a chair near the corner. I didn't sit. The screen came to life. The video began, Damon's voice first, confident and charming. "She's recovering from a tiny outpatient thing," he said, the room laughing with him. Then came the shift, the tone, the pitch, the smirk. A pause long enough to make the mockery echo. Gasps scattered through the room as the video rolled on, the time-stamped email requesting my surgery delay, his signature at the bottom. And finally, the testimonies, 3 nurses, one voice trembling as she described being denied leave during her miscarriage. The last clip was Dr. Leora Brandt's statement, cancer. Stage 2. 5 inches. Full ovary removal. Emergency. If she'd waited, we wouldn't be having this conversation. When the screen went dark, no one spoke. The air thickened with disbelief and guilt. Damon broke the silence. "This is ridiculous," he said sharply. "You're letting a personal issue turn into a witch hunt. She's bitter, she's emotional." "Stop," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a blade. "I almost died. You scheduled a party." He turned toward me finally, face pale, jaw tight. "You're twisting this." I reached into the folder Juno had handed me before we entered and slid it across the table toward the chairwoman. Inside were copies of the cropped photo, my oncology report, and a handwritten timeline of every ignored message, every brushed-off warning. "I'm not twisting anything," I said evenly. "I'm straightening it out." My mother's voice broke the silence next, fragile but desperate. "We didn't know, sweetheart," she whispered. "We thought you'd be fine." I looked at her, not cruelly but clearly. "You didn't want to know. That's different." Her eyes filled. Damon looked down at the table, avoiding her. For the first time, I saw fear, not the kind that comes from being caught, but from realizing the performance was over. Miles cleared his throat. "Effective immediately," he said, "Damon Vexler is suspended pending further review. His access to hospital systems and decision-making authority is revoked. His conduct reflects a pattern of negligence and abuse unbecoming of hospital leadership." A collective exhale filled the room, some of relief, some of shame. Damon stared at Miles, voice low and hard. "You can't do this. I built this department." Miles met his eyes. "Then you should have remembered what it was built for." Across the room, Maylee stood. She gathered her bag slowly, smoothed her skirt, and walked toward the exit without looking at him. Her heels echoed down the corridor until the sound disappeared. Verena reached across the table, her fingers trembling. "Damon," she said, voice shaking, "say something. Fix this." He didn't move. His hands stayed folded, knuckles white. The control he worshipped had finally slipped beyond reach. I stood there for another moment, the four-pole clicking softly beside me. The chairwoman closed the folder, looking up with something like quiet respect. "Ms. Rowan," she said, "thank you for coming forward." I nodded, but my gaze stayed on Damon. He looked smaller somehow, not because he was sitting, but because he no longer occupied the space he'd built out of fear and arrogance. As I turned to leave, my mother whispered, "Addison, wait." I paused at the door. "You once told me not to make things worse," I said softly. "This is me making them better." The hallway outside was blindingly bright. The noise of the hospital filtered back in, carts rolling, intercoms humming, people living. Each step away from that room felt like breathing for the first time. I didn't scream. I didn't slam anything. But the silence when I walked out was louder than every speech Damon ever gave. The air in the corridor carried a strange quiet, the kind that follows something finished but not yet forgotten. I didn't turn back toward the boardroom. I didn't need to. The weight of their silence trailed behind me like smoke. By the time I reached the elevator, I felt lighter, not healed, not free, but unburdened. Downstairs, the hospital lobby was humming again, patients, nurses, the constant shuffle of life resuming where mine had nearly stopped. Outside, rain had begun its slow descent, washing the world into gray streaks. I thought of Damon then, how he always hated the rain, how he said it made the city look cheap. I smiled faintly at the thought. Across town, he sat in his SUV in the parking garage, engine off, watching the rain bead across the windshield. The phone on his console buzzed endlessly, vibrating like a living thing. The sound of each notification stacked on top of the last until it felt like static in his head. This wasn't silence. This was noise without control. He picked up the phone, thumbed through the flood of alerts. Emails, texts, social tags, mentions. The hospital's official Facebook page was buried in comments, thousands of them. Angry faces, red hearts, and that one caption appearing over and over, erased by family. News outlets had already caught the story, VP mocks sister's cancer, board responds. The headline crawled across the top of every feed. His name was trending, not with congratulations but condemnation. Employee forums had turned into confessionals. Nurses spoke of denied leave, berated shifts, a leader who managed by fear. Even a national advocacy group had quoted me, my words from the meeting, under a photo of a hospital hallway. She didn't scream. She stood still and let the truth speak. He scrolled faster, thumb shaking. Melissa's number, voicemail. Verena, no answer. The walls of the car seemed to shrink. He tried calling again. Same silence. When he finally stepped out into the rain, the sound hit him like applause he hadn't earned. By the time he reached home, the house lights glowed like a stage already set. The door was ajar. Suitcases stood by the stairs. Maylise was in the living room, folding clothes into a case, movements sharp and efficient. Their son, Liam, sat halfway up the staircase, headphones on, his small shoulders stiff. Damon dropped his keys on the counter. You're really doing this? Over internet noise? Maylise didn't look up. No. Over watching you destroy your sister and not even flinch. He stepped closer, rain dripping from his sleeves. You think this makes sense? That video's out of context. Everyone loves a villain online. She zipped the suitcase. You made yourself one. Maylise, he said, voice cracking slightly. After everything I've done for this family. She cut him off, standing tall, meeting his eyes for the first time. You didn't do it for us. You did it for you. The rest of us just played our parts. He looked toward Liam, searching for an ally. Buddy, tell your mom she's overreacting. Liam removed one headphone, eyes flat, voice quiet but clear. I don't want to be like you. The words landed harder than any headline. Damon froze as they walked past him, the sound of the door closing behind them soft but final. At the hospital, I sat upright in bed, the glow of my laptop illuminating the dim room. The online world moved faster than I could process, spinning the story into something larger than any of us. My name had become a symbol now, memes, quotes, commentary. One video clipped the moment I said I almost died. You scheduled a party. Another slowed my walk out of the meeting, overlaying piano music and captions about resilience. An influencer's voice floated from one of the clips. She didn't fight back. She stood still and let the truth scream. I closed the laptop. No smile. No satisfaction. Just stillness. The room hummed with low light and quiet beeping. Juno peeked in once, checking vitals, offering a nod that said everything words couldn't. I nodded back, gently. Healing didn't feel triumphant, it felt tired, slow, and strangely calm. Somewhere in the background, I heard a TV on low volume. The same story again, replayed on national news. The anchor's voice steady, detached. Public outrage continues as more testimonies emerge from hospital staff. Former executive Damon Vexler has not issued a statement. A flash of memory broke through. Damon's 17th birthday. I could still smell the frosting and hear the static of the old radio that played in our kitchen. He stood in front of the cake, 17 candles glowing. I handed him the knife. "Don't forget to thank your sister," my mother had said lightly. He never did. That night, I cleaned up the plates while they watched a movie. My name wasn't in the conversation. My effort was invisible, my silence expected. Back then, I'd convinced myself that was normal, that being unseen was safer than being resented. Now I knew better. By the next morning, the headlines had evolved again. The video wasn't just viral, it was viral history. News programs looped it with commentary about compassion, ethics, leadership. My brother's once polished photo sat beside a new caption, "When empathy is optional, failure is guaranteed." I watched from the hospital bed as my face flickered across the screen. My eyes looked older, stronger than I remembered. I barely recognized the woman they were talking about, the one being quoted as if she were something more than a person who'd simply refused to stay quiet. Meanwhile, across town, Damon sat in his dark living room, TV light flickering over his face. The sound was off, but the caption spoke for him. He scrolled through messages, old friends avoiding, colleagues distancing, the board's final email confirming his suspension had escalated to termination review. He threw the phone across the couch, gripping his temples. His reflection in the blank television screen looked hollow, drained. The sound of rain returned, tapping against the windows like a reminder that even weather had a rhythm he couldn't command. His face appeared one last time on a late-night talk show segment titled Leaders Without Compassion. They played his own words, his laugh, his voice. "She likes to make a splash." The host turned to the camera, voice steady. "This is how you drown." At the hospital, I exhaled softly, eyes fixed on the muted television. It felt strange, seeing someone's downfall play like entertainment. But this wasn't revenge. This was exposure. "They turned my pain into content," I whispered. But for once, I didn't bleed alone. Outside the window, dawn broke quietly, the city's light softening through rain clouds. I let the curtains fall half closed, the room dim again. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It healed, slowly, gently, as if the world had finally learned to listen. The week that followed felt suspended in a kind of still air. The noise had quieted, not because the world had moved on, but because it was waiting to see what would happen next. I could feel that pause everywhere, the nurses' cautious smiles, the way the hospital halls seemed to listen. I'd become a symbol for something larger than my story, but this time, I wasn't afraid of being seen. When I entered the boardroom again, the chairs had been rearranged. It wasn't the same table where they had once questioned me, it was a new formation, a circle instead of a line. For once, it didn't feel like judgment. It felt like beginning. I sat at the far end, not as a patient, but as a consultant. Dr. Leora Brandt was beside me, posture straight, her quiet strength humming like a current. Across the table were new faces, a nurse advocate, a patient representative, a legal advisor. There was no Damon. The nameplate that once bore his title was gone, the surface beneath it gleaming and bare. Miles Kavanaugh opened the meeting, his voice steady and clear. "Before we proceed," he said, "the board has finalized its decision. Damon Vexler's employment is officially terminated. His medical administration license is now under review by the state board." There was no applause. Just silence, firm, collective, complete. The kind of silence that means accountability, not pity. Somewhere far from this room, I imagined him watching on a cracked tablet, the grainy live stream playing out like an echo of a life he used to command. He used to hold the mic. Now he watched from shadows. Miles looked toward me. "Ms. Rowan, would you like to begin?" I stood carefully. My stitches still pulled faintly, a reminder of everything my body had survived. "This isn't about retribution," I said. "It's about reform." I clicked the remote, and the presentation appeared behind me, the Grace Protocol. My voice didn't tremble. It had been tested by worse things. "The protocol outlines mandatory family support presence for major surgeries," I explained. "No patient should sign a consent form alone because their family chose convenience over compassion. It also requires an ethics review before any patient's story or recovery can be used for hospital PR. And finally, it establishes a confidential hotline for staff to report neglect or coercion from leadership, without fear." When I finished, there was no immediate reaction, just a stillness that felt like respect. Then, one by one, heads nodded. Applause followed, not loud, but real. For the first time, they didn't see me as someone recovering. They saw me as someone rebuilding. Afterward, as the meeting adjourned, I packed my notes slowly. My hand brushed over the folder labeled Implementation Timeline, and I felt something quiet shift inside me, like the final piece of a puzzle sliding into place. Outside the boardroom, Verena stood waiting in the hallway. I'd almost expected it. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in the way people do when their certainty collapses. "I watched the whole meeting," she said softly. "You looked powerful." I studied her face, searching for guilt, maybe remorse, maybe just recognition. "That's what happens," I said, "when no one's left to shrink you." She blinked, her eyes glistening. "Addison, I know I wasn't." I stepped back before she could finish. My voice stayed gentle, but the truth didn't soften. "I don't hate you," I said. "I just stopped bleeding for your comfort." She covered her mouth with her hand, as if the words themselves were heavy. I walked past her quietly, slowly, gently. The corridor was warm with afternoon light. It reminded me of another hallway years ago, when I was 18 and holding my college acceptance letter. I'd run into the kitchen, heart pounding, expecting pride. "Mom, I got in," I had said, waving the paper. "Full scholarship." Verena had looked up from her magazine. "Well, of course you did," she said lightly. "You're responsible. Damon will catch up." Even then, she'd turned the moment into comparison. I hadn't realized how much I'd carried that tone, measured, dismissive, throughout my life. I folded that memory now, like an old letter I no longer needed to reread. By evening, I was home. The apartment was quiet, but not lonely. The hum of the city below felt softer, as if life had shifted its rhythm to match mine. A single envelope waited on my desk. My name was written in neat black ink, the handwriting precise and unfamiliar. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter from the National Association of Patient Advocacy. "Dear Ms. Rowan, your courage has changed the conversation surrounding family neglect and healthcare. We would be honored to have you as our keynote speaker for our upcoming conference, Reclaiming the Silenced." I read it twice, tracing the words with my fingertips. For once, they didn't ask me to explain my pain. They asked me to teach what it built. I leaned back in my chair. The setting sun cast gold across the walls. For years, I'd wanted my family to see me, to understand. But now, I realized the only validation that mattered was the one I gave myself. The room was calm, filled with the scent of fresh paper and faint coffee. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. I folded the letter, placing it beside a framed photo, not of the Vexlers, but of Juno, Leora, and me, standing in the hospital corridor, all of us smiling, exhausted, alive. For the first time, my life wasn't defined by who forgot me. It was shaped by who stood beside me when I remembered myself. The morning of the conference began the way most turning points do, quietly. Seattle's skyline shimmered under a hesitant sun, the kind that never stayed long but still tried to show up. I stood in front of the mirror, fastening the button on a navy blazer that didn't quite feel like mine yet. For a second, I saw the faint scar below my collarbone, the one that peeked out when I moved. A reminder and a signature all in one. The envelope from the National Association of Patient Advocacy sat open on my desk. The invitation inside looked almost ceremonial, keynote speaker, reclaiming the silenced. I picked it up again, tracing my name printed in bold letters. I'd signed countless forms, medical releases, reports. But this was the first paper that felt like it belonged to me. The conference center downtown buzzed with the sounds of arrival, coffee cups clinking, footsteps against marble, the soft murmur of people greeting one another with the kind of warmth that comes from shared wounds. A large screen glowed at the end of the lobby, Reclaiming the Silenced, a patient advocacy summit. Beneath the title was my name. I stood backstage as technicians checked microphones. The fabric of the curtain brushed against my sleeve, cool and steady. I breathed in deeply. I didn't come to relive the pain. I came to give it a job. Leora appeared beside me, clipboard in hand, her usual calm framed by a smile that was almost maternal. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. As ready as anyone who's about to talk about being erased. She squeezed my arm gently. "Then tell them how you wrote yourself back in." The stage lights dimmed for a moment as the announcer stepped forward. "Please welcome Dr. Leora Brandt, head of oncology at St. Catherine's Medical Center." Applause filled the room, steady and warm. Leora spoke briefly, her voice carrying both strength and reverence. "Some of you know the story," she said. But what matters today is what it became. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Addison Rowan. I stepped forward. The lights were bright, but not harsh. Faces blurred into a soft horizon of anticipation. The applause rose, not wild, not performative, just steady. Like waves. The podium felt solid beneath my hands. I didn't use notes. I didn't need them. Last year, I had cancer. The room went still. Every chair leaned forward a fraction. But that's not what tried to kill me. What nearly did was the silence, the assumption that I'd survive without support, that pain was something optional, something to be endured quietly for everyone else's comfort. I paused, letting the truth settle. I was told I was dramatic. That I picked the worst time to be fragile. That family came first, but only when it was convenient. I learned that some people love you most when you're invisible. Faces in the front row nodded slowly. A woman dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I used to think survival was about staying alive, I continued. Now I know it's about staying visible. Because when people stop seeing you, they stop believing you matter. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was alive, full of recognition. I closed my eyes for a second. For a flicker of time, I wasn't on stage anymore. I was 8 years old again, crouched in a kitchen pantry, knees to my chest. Verina's voice echoed through the house, sharp, clipped, scolding Damon for spilling something on the carpet. He cried. She soothed him. I stayed quiet, clutching my knees tighter, thinking that if I stayed small enough, I'd cause less trouble. They thought I didn't need protecting. Because I didn't scream. When I opened my eyes again, I saw the crowd, not as strangers, but as people who'd lived their own versions of that pantry. People who'd been told to be quiet, to be easy, to be good. My story isn't rare, I said softly. That's the tragedy of it. It happens every day in hospitals, homes, workplaces. But what's also true, what's beautifully true, is that recovery doesn't begin with healing. It begins with recognition. Applause rose again, slower this time. Like gratitude given form. I smiled then, not out of pride, but peace. After the speech, I stepped off stage and exhaled. The noise of the lobby returned, voices, laughter, the smell of coffee. Leora wrapped her arms around me. You did it, she whispered. Not alone, I said. In the hallway, as the crowd thinned, a young woman approached me. Her hospital wristband peeked out beneath her sleeve. A small port line ran along her neck. Ms. Rowan, she asked quietly. Thank you. I stopped apologizing after hearing your story online. I realized I didn't owe anyone my silence. Her words hit me harder than any applause. I hugged her, brief but real. Keep speaking, I said softly. That's how we stay alive. The rest of the day unfolded gently. Conversations, handshakes, small smiles exchanged like promises. It wasn't grand or cinematic. It was human. That was enough. By evening, I was home again. The sky had turned silver, clouds folding over one another like pages in an unfinished book. The apartment was warm, smelling faintly of chamomile and rain. My plants by the window leaned toward the last light. I set a cup of tea beside my laptop and opened a new document. The title blinked at the top of the page, Advocacy Training Module, Empowerment Through Listening. My fingers hovered over the keys before the words began to flow. Each line wasn't about me anymore. It was about us, the people who had been dismissed, the ones told to shrink, the ones who'd learned to grow anyway. Outside, the rain began again, but softly this time, as if it had learned gentleness too. Some people need closure. I needed distance. Forgiveness isn't owed. Peace is earned. And this time, I didn't disappear. I stepped off the stage and into my life. And maybe that's the lesson, sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who insist we stay silent about it. So what would you do if your family treated your pain like an inconvenience? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this one stayed with you, make sure to subscribe. Because the next story might just be yours.